Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Welcome back to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithling.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
All right, with a little distance from its debut in theaters, we are revisiting The Mandalorian and Grogu. But before we dive into that, Jay, I want to remind everyone where we can be found on social media.
Absolutely, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram very conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
The disc is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, and we're now broadcasting to the galaxy. So we are not alone tonight. We have one of our favorite returning guests who's been on the show quite a bit. You know him as the host of Star Wars 7x7 and the author of Hyperspacing Hope and the presenter of a TEDx talk by the same name. Welcome back, Alan Voivod.
Thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely on.
One of my first times actually, I think on the, well, I guess with Hyperspacing Hope, it was a different situation, but one of the first times I think, you know, and as a quote unquote regular episode. So this is kind of fun. I like this.
Yeah, because normally you do the movie breakdowns with us as well. So we're going to have to get you that gold jacket, you know, for the reoccurring guests.
Oh,
we have a couple on order, you know, so.
Those are backing up.
Proudly.
All right. So the whole idea of this show is that The Mandalorian and Grogu has been in theaters for over a month, and it's on its way out at this point. And so we thought, now that we've had a little distance from our initial viewings, that we would revisit the movie. And in Alan's case, we get some of his first impressions, because as far as I'm aware, I don't think you've had an opportunity to share those anywhere yet. But can't say I've been tracking that closely, so please correct me if I'm wrong.
You're not wrong.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, you know, Jay and I broke down the movie in two parts 3 and 4 weeks ago. And at any rate, so at this point, how many times has everybody seen the movie? I am up to 3 viewings. I went and saw it on the opening night, or Friday night. You know, it's hard to say what's an opening night anymore because they have fan viewings and whatever, you know, early releases and things like that. And then I saw it the following week with more family while they were down for graduation. And then my brother and my niece came down the week after that, and I saw it a third time. But Jay, how many times have you seen the movie now?
Well, I've seen it twice. And the first time, Alan, I don't know if you've heard this story, and I figured out why, Dennis, by the way. My son and I went to, it was a Thursday afternoon showing. So it was before it actually came out on Friday. And we got there like 10, 12 minutes late, somewhere in there. By the time we sat down, it was 14 minutes into the movie, because I was thinking that there was going to be previews. But because it was a special showing, I figured out later, because I went back to the same theater and saw it with a teacher friend of mine. And there was 20 minutes of previews on this one. So I missed the first like 14 minutes the first time around. And so I got to see that obviously the second time around. And I realized I didn't really miss a whole lot, just, you know, the action from the very beginning. So very long story short, I have seen the movie twice. So Alan, how about you?
I too have seen it twice. And it's funny you mentioned that, because I always thought that was maybe a West Coast, East Coast thing, because I grew up in Los Angeles, and when they say the movie starts at X time, usually that means that's when the previews are starting and the trailers and so forth, and maybe a couple of commercials, not like the whole front and center business that you get into, right? But like, just this is when the lights are dimming to get everything started. When I moved to New Hampshire and I showed up at a movie theater like 5 minutes after the showtime started and published, because I thought previews will still be running, it was already 5 minutes into the movie, and I actually went out and like, what are you doing? Like, you know, you started the movie like, you know, early or something. And they were like, yeah, it says 7, so we started at 7. I was like, okay. So it was like, that was my first little bit of culture shock moving to the East Coast. So yeah, I saw it on Thursday night on the preview night and did not have the experience of it's any different. It was just, no, it started at 7 and it started at 7. And then I saw it. I think the best part of it was the halo of nostalgia. Like, I was able to see it with my younger son, who's now 18 years old. Back when the Disney movies were coming out, he had a close friend who he hasn't hung out with all that often anymore, but who used to be like, can I come with you to see the movies? And so I invited him, and so the two of them went, and my two nephews went. And so, like, the best part of it was that, introduction of newer generations and doing things in that very nostalgic halo of things for me. And then I saw it a second time by myself, so that way I could fully concentrate on the movie and not answer questions from all sides and have conversations while I was doing it.
Yeah.
All right.
I feel that because it was my third viewing before I was able to see the entire movie uninterrupted. Didn't have to go for a bathroom break, didn't have to help someone get to the bathroom or any of that type of stuff. But I totally feel that going and being able to see it without interruption like that. So Jay and I have had ample opportunity on this podcast to talk about our impressions of the movie after our first viewing and stuff like that. But Alan, what did you think after you saw it the first time?
Oh, goodness. After the first time, I thought that was all right.
Mm-hmm.
and that was about it. And as a result, it is like kind of called into question for me, like, my entire Star Wars fandom and my thoughts about how I actually think about Star Wars storytelling and the movies, and whether I believe some of the things that I've said over the past 10, 12 years about Star Wars. It really has kind of shaken me up, to be honest. I am still wrestling with it. I mean, as a movie itself, I enjoyed it. Like, it was fun. It was fine. Like, there are definitely some plot holes and some things that bug me. Like, it feels, I mean, we're fine with spoilers and all that at this point, I think, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, just the guy that he captures, Commander Coin or whatever his name was, just that, off screen, oh yeah, he gave up everything, and that's great. So I didn't necessarily need to see an interrogation scene, but it felt very Deus Ex Machina in a way. Like, just, oh, that was convenient and it happened off screen. The like perfect situation. That's just one thing out of many things, basically. But if I think one of the early reviews I read said something to the effect of it's 4 episodes of The Mandalorian in an IMAX trench coat, and I feel like that's basically ultimately how I feel about the movie. It was fine, it was enjoyable, but I'm not surprised that it is the underperforming compared to everything except I don't know if this is a jinx, but the last time Rada the Hutt showed up in a movie, it also did not perform well at the box office. So I don't
Good point.
know if that's just a coincidence or what, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised, unfortunately. So that's a little sad for me.
No, it's fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, the movie's had a fairly mixed reaction. I think, having listened to a number of other reviews on a number of other podcasts and having read a number of reviews and stuff like that, I feel like I enjoy it more than the average person that has seen it. But as I said when we initially started talking about the movie, it's certainly not in my top 5. And at the time, I was like, I was not prepared to rank it anywhere in the Star Wars movie, simply because in the moment, it was just great being at a Star Wars movie again, right? I mean, it's been the first time in 6.5 years since we had an opportunity to go to the theaters and see Star Wars. And, the old saying is like, it's like pizza, it's at the end of the day, it's pizza. It's good. And, right. And in my opinion, there's something that was Star Wars. At the end of the day, it's Star Wars. It's good. And if nothing else, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are on record saying that they created this movie in a way that it would be a jumping off point for fans that maybe haven't seen anything of Star Wars, that aren't familiar with The Mandalorian. And it's really funny because one of the funniest takes I've seen on this was Instagram, when a woman who did not watch any of The Mandalorian before she went to this and was wondering why this guy was dragging a baby along to all of his fights. But yeah, anyways, I mean, we get it as fans of The Mandalorian and having watched all 3 seasons plus the Book of Boba Fett.
Yep.
But still, when it comes down to it, and I guess this leads into my next question, themes on this movie. It seems to be very light in that regard. I feel like when, Alan, you are the hyperspacing Hope guy here, and, Hope is such a big element in all of Star Wars. But if I'm asked to find a theme with this movie, I can loosely say it's all about having confidence in your training and preparing the next generation, being prepared to let the next generation look out for you the way you look out for them and stuff like that. But other than maybe 3 fleeting moments in this movie, I don't think that they really spent a lot of time developing that. But, and I'll turn it over to you, Alan, first, and then you, Jay. I mean, is there anything else I'm missing as far as theme goes for this film?
I mean, I don't think you missed anything. That's essentially the one big idea I took from it as well. And yeah, you kind of had to hunt for it. I mean, I don't necessarily need to be hit over the head with a theme or anything like that, but you really kind of had to interpret it. The only other thing I got out of it was that there was a very unusual sort of Christ-like parallel with the Mandalorian. I was thinking this when when he got poisoned and he was running through the forest and Grogu decided not to leave him behind. So Grogu finds him. Grogu builds a little hut, which then, is that the kind of, hut that just all members of his species know how to build? I don't know, but but he put Mando in there. Mando was in there for 2 nights. And then, and it was the second night that he got the little poison antidote thing. And I was like, I know exactly what's going to happen. The 3rd morning, Grogu's going to wake up and the tomb is going to be empty. And
Interesting.
That's exactly what happened. I leaned over to my son. I was like, it's like Mando is Jesus. And he was like, what are you talking about? Like, look, it's the second night in the tomb. He's not going to be there in the morning when he wakes up. And lo and behold, he's standing out in the middle of the forest. So at this point, I guess we can ask ourselves whether the Mandalorian is in fact, what's the word? Corporeal, or if now he's a Sixth Sense character and the Grogu is basically Haley Joel Osment in this whole situation now. I don't know. I'm just goofing around basically.
No, a Sixth Sense reference. I love it. And I especially love it because last weekend, when my family was gathered around the living room, we were trying, and my oldest DJ asked if over COVID, okay, completely going off on a tangent here. Over COVID, one of the things we did is we introduced our boys to a whole lot of movies from the 80s and the 90s that they were now old enough to see, that they would not have been appropriate 5-6 years prior to that. Right. And it became a real popular thing. And then we parlayed that into watching like all the seasons of most of Star Trek and other series and stuff like that. And one of the things that I put on that list was The Sixth Sense. We didn't watch it that night, but it is now on the list. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's fantastic. Jay, how about you? Was there any other themes that you grasped onto while watching this movie, or did we hit it with the generational responsibility thing?
I think, for the most part, you guys hit that. And for me, Star Wars has always been about family. And so I guess that is what I took away from this more than anything else, because you're right. This was a movie that, at the end of the day, it was just a fun Star Wars adventure. And we said that it was kind of meant to be able to be embraced by generations and embraced by people who maybe didn't have a whole lot of experience with the Mandalorian and Grogu in the sense of the series and what their history was together. But you think about it, and it really is, we get to watch Din being a dad again in real time, and just seeing that evolution that we've seen throughout the series, but being placed in this different type of situation. And then we also get to see Rada basically saying, no, I'm not going to embrace my family legacy. I'm going to break the cycle. And I'm going to be my own person. I'm going to be my own man. This is what I'm going to do. And honestly, he's my favorite character in the entire movie, even more so than Din and Grogu. And I was telling Dennis about that. Yeah, like I can't believe that I, not like fell in love with Rada, but I just appreciated his character so much. And, and I don't know if it was the way that Jeremy Allen White delivered his lines and just the emotion that he put into it. But I was, it's about found family. It's about rejecting toxic family legacy. It's about, those kinds of things were the themes that really, really stood out to me.
Yeah, that's completely legit too. Unfortunately, it put me in mind of another one of the gripes I had, which was I felt like they had him give a little bit of a monologue around his "I'm not my father" kind of thing. That in terms of not needing to be hit on the head with a theme, I felt like I was being a little hit on the head with that one. But I do like that as a theme for sure. Like, I think it's a really interesting character situation. And I also was very impressed with Hut's fighting. Like, I did not think that Hut's fighting was going to be entertaining at all, or actually, like significantly, challenging. And not only was the gladiatorial version of Rada fighting, impressive, but also even with the twins and that whole SmackDown Huts against each other, that was really well done. I was very impressed with that. How did you guys like that?
Oh yeah, it's like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome meets Crocodile Death Roll, I mean, that's basically what you're looking at, and it's refreshing. Like you said, it wasn't something that you expected to see, and you're like, "Oh wow, that's how they move. This is what they can do." And yeah, I like that too.
Yeah, I had low expectations for Rada. I mean, we all knew he was going to be in the movie going into it, and I just did not expect much from that character other than an arena scene. But then when we got more of it, yeah, some of the monologuing aside, I thought that was a standout part of the movie, that we were able to develop that character. One of the things I enjoy most about Star Wars, and different authors have done this as well with books and things like that, is that you take an established stereotype for Star Wars, and then you turn it on your head, and you make it, and you do it well. And that's what I appreciate about Rada, is that you took these Huts, which we know as vile gangsters, they're slovenly, they're gross. But then we got Rada, who was more thoughtful, who rejected, as Jay was saying, rejected the family legacy, was jacked, and was a champion in the arena, and then was kind to Grogu and stuff like that. And I thought that was one of the better parts of the movie. So
yeah, and they did have like the opposite end of the spectrum too, because they did amp up the grossness too with the twins. And the entire, hive of Huts as they were going into their castle, their lair. So yeah.
So, Alan, I'm sensing a certain amount of disappointment when it comes to the movie with the way you've been talking about it, which is fair and it's completely fine. And I think one of the things that I've seen, the most honest and one of the fairest criticisms, I think, is that this movie played a little too safe with this, and that it gave us an adventure. It didn't stray into it didn't dare to do the things that Rian Johnson tried to do with Last Jedi, which has hit and missed with various Star Wars fans. It didn't take the chances that maybe some of our favorite Star Wars movies did. We're looking back now. The Empire Strikes Back was not initially well received when that movie first came out. It was often described as having ruined Star Wars, but as it aged, it's become widely regarded as the best Star Wars movie. I am not saying this movie is that. Do not misconstrue anything I'm going to do. But
we're going to get hate email.
No. That's not where I'm going. I realized that I strayed a little too far with what I'm trying to say. But the thing is that this didn't take huge thematic chances. It did not try to, it didn't reinterpret, as far as I can, in my opinion, it didn't do a whole lot to try and reinterpret what we know about Star Wars or make what we know about, look at different Star Wars differently, which is interesting because my perspective, I think, clashes with something you said off the top of this episode, which is that it's made you question some of the things that you've said about Star Wars over the last dozen years. So what is your response to that? Do you think it was too safe, or did you think it took bad chances, or what is it here that ultimately led to this disappointment that I'm sensing?
So, safety is an interesting way of putting it, I think. And yes, I would agree with the idea that it played it too safe. It was a very straightforward movie. There were not a lot of hugely original ideas to it, but it made me think about scarcity as something that for the longest time I have thought was one of the key ingredients in Star Wars success, that scarcity was something important to Star Wars. But that's not an issue here because we haven't had, as you pointed out, a Star Wars movie for 6.5 years. So the fact that we're suddenly getting one, that should have, helped with that. But we've also had Star Wars live action content and, a huge bounty of it with the Mandalorian and Ahsoka and Andor and the Acolyte and Skeleton Crew, on and on, like the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, like the Book of Boba Fett. I mean, there's been a lot of live action Star Wars content that we've gotten over the past few years. So, it almost takes away from Star Wars live action being that special. I mean, we've always been able to dive into books and comics and whatnot. And it made me start thinking that maybe even at my youngest age, when I was reading the Marvel comics, like the original run back in the day, that maybe there was a part of me that understood that those were somebody else's stories. Lucas has famously said, about the expanded universe, like, that was other people doing that thing, and those aren't my stories. And that led to the whole thing of G canon and S canon and C canon and all that stuff. And I wonder if I had the sense of the idea that the movies were always special, like even when I was young and diving into the stories that were there in Splinter of the Mind's Eye and the Han Solo trilogy by Brian Daley and the L. Neil Smith Lando books and whatnot. Like those were not George's stories. They were great stories, but they were not necessarily his. So I wonder if that's a part of it. And then the other thing I wonder is about the stakes of the movie. And I read something about how, somebody was saying like, why does every movie have to involve, a giant, galaxy threatening situation? Like, why can't we just have fun? And that's fair. Like, there's absolutely a good argument for that. Like, let's have a movie and have fun. But all 11 Star Wars movies up to this point, I'm not counting the Clone Wars movie because it was an animated movie. It's the introduction to the series, first 4 episodes. So I'm not trying to split hairs, but just the 11 live action Star Wars movies, even Rogue One and Solo, were all about significant moments in Star Wars mythology. Like Rogue One told an untold story of how the plans got in the hands of the rebels and told it in an absolutely epic fashion. Like it was astounding, like the story that you've never known the truth about until now. And they told it so well. Solo as an origin story for how the most iconic smuggler and one of the most beloved characters of our time became who he was. And the stakes were comparatively low in that movie. And yet I enjoyed the heck out of that movie. And I saw it twice as many times as I saw The Mandalorian. And I've watched Solo multiple times on Disney Plus. I don't have the sense that I'm going to go back and watch The Mandalorian and Grogu on Disney Plus. And I feel like that's even part of Disney Plus's plan. Like when I've listened to their investor calls, they talk about how they are wanting to move more towards having the movies be feeders for Disney Plus subscriptions and driving the subscriptions. The last one I listened to talked about Inside Out 2 and how that was generating so many new subscriptions to Disney Plus when it made the jump from theaters to the streaming platform. This is obviously a while back, but like that idea that they're thinking differently about this, like it's not going to work unless they are doing something significant with the movie. And maybe playing it safe is one way to put it, but it is the idea of not coming up with a reason for being that is remarkable. Like the first 4 episodes of The Mandalorian season 1, that would have been a reason for being, because they introduced Baby Yoda in that first episode, and that would have been like a holy crow moment that would have made people go back to the movie theater over and over again. Like it would have had it. And yeah, this did not have that. This did not have something that would have people talking around the water cooler. This did not have any major development in the Mandoverse, if you want to put it that way. The idea of eventually a movie that everything is going to lead up to with, the Ahsoka series and the Thrawn, stuff and the Mandalorian and so forth. Like the fact that some of these shows are supposed to build up to one giant, amazing thing, like that's going to be a movie, I think, that warrants being a movie. But I think, and I feel like I'm afraid that Star Wars is leaving me generationally. Like if I'm aging out of the world of Star Wars. I'm really going on a lot longer about this than I meant to when I started opening my mouth about this. I apologize.
That's all right. No, do not apologize. You're good.
I'll take a breath in a second. I swear. I'm like, I want people to go to the theater and enjoy it. And I hope to high heaven, like when I see people talking about, I brought my kids to it and they loved it and it's great. Like, I hope that those kids are going to be able to have the same kind of reaction to The Mandalorian and Grogu that my kids had to The Force Awakens and Rogue One and The Last Jedi, and that generations in between them had with the prequels, and that I had with the originals. Like I don't get the idea that the current generation is going to have that same connection. They're going to be like, oh, this is fun content, and that's it. So okay.
No, that's fantastic. As I said before we started this conversation, all I ask for is your honesty, and I appreciate that you're delivering it. That's exactly what for our discussions here.
For sure.
And I'm gonna kind of springboard off that and ask you this question, Jay. Should they have gone with season 4 of The Mandalorian instead of having done this? Now, I'm going to say this because we're recording this episode before we're recording the prior 2 episodes that are going to come out before this. And one of those things is some of the comments that Dave Filoni said and others have said about what was supposed to happen in season 4. That got changed when they decided to go with a movie instead. But putting all of that aside for a moment, what do you think, Jay? Should they, do you think the movie was the right way to go, or should they just stuck with season 4 of The Mandalorian?
Well, it's funny because you're going to end up hearing this comment twice from me if you listen to all of our episodes. But just to back up for just a second into, everything that you said, Alan, and I'm processing all of that too with, where is the entry point into Star Wars for this new generation and what this movie means for Star Wars in general. Cause you're right. I mean, it is definitely adventure over mythology, and it's definitely, more of the relationships over lore and all of those things. So, it's kind of, I'm very torn about how I feel about the way that we consume our Star Wars, because just sitting here thinking about, and this is going to lead into the answer to your question, Dennis, I promise. But, just the way that we consume Star Wars and just thinking about, oh, okay, well, if it goes to Disney Plus first versus if it goes to the movie theater first, or, what's the best course of action? Like, what should we be doing? And how's the best way to go about this? So I just think that it's kind of a different way that we never thought about doing, back in the day when we were just going to the movie theater. You know what I'm saying? So to answer your question, Dennis, I think it's a yes and no answer. So, and this is going to sound totally cop out, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So, I say the easy answer is that with the way that they presented The Mandalorian in the theaters, it makes it more accessible to that new generation and to being able to take younger kids. And even though it was very violent, which I've talked about that before, but it's gives them like an entry point and something fun for a family to do. What does it not do well as far as sacrificing season 4 of The Mandalorian is we sacrificed all of the storytelling that has come to this point because you're basically taking shortcuts to allow the movie to be accessible to a wider audience as opposed to being able to have a season 4 where you can elaborate on everything that has come before that, because everybody who has watched the other seasons understands the characters, they understand the storylines, they understand what's at stake, they understand all the interconnectedness of it. And so that's what's being sacrificed. So cop out answer, maybe, but
No.
so that's my
that
yes
makes
to
sense.
no.
Yeah, Alan, what's your thought on that? Should they have gone with a season 4 over the movie, or was it a no-win situation?
Yes, I'll say they should have gone with season 4. I'll just say that. Why not? I'll put a flag in the ground on it. Just based on, I don't know if I would have necessarily said that before the movie came out, but having seen the movie, I think, I think they would have been, well, that's even the wrong way to say it. I was about to say they would have been better served by doing it as season 4. I don't know if they, as in Lucasfilm, would have been better served by doing that. Who knows what drives these decisions business wise, and I'm sure there are a lot of very experienced people who are looking at a much higher calculus than any of us are in figuring out how to do this, because ultimately this comes down to dollars and cents, and they're figuring out how to maximize their investment in Lucasfilm without question. So that's perfectly fine. I accept that as par for the course. But yeah, I feel like they would have done better if they had just gone with season 4 based on what they decided to do with this movie, or rather what they didn't decide to do with this movie, which is actually give it some kind of stakes that made it worth watching and worth talking about afterward. Like, I think about it in terms of, all the stuff that came out around the hunt for Ben Solo, right? Like, so I'm so curious about what this could be. And oh gosh, Steven Soderbergh is a terrific filmmaker. And the fact that Adam Driver was in on the idea, I'm so curious about that, and think, just the reports of, Bob Iger going, he's dead. That's it. You can't make this movie. He's dead.
Right.
Just so short-sighted and frustrating. And goodness gracious me. Yeah, I feel like there are way more interesting stories to be told that would drive conversation and drive box office much more so than The Mandalorian. Like, the fact that Backrooms and Obsession knocked it out of the the top spot in the box office like that quickly, I mean, it's insane. Like, that tells you that nobody's really thinking about The Mandalorian and Grogu and thinking like, ooh, this is a movie worth talking about, it's a movie worth sharing, it's a movie worth seeing over and over again. Like, it's like, it is, maybe that wasn't their goal. Maybe their goal was to put out some popcorn entertainment, and if that's what the goal was, then they succeeded. But yeah, I think I was hoping for more.
All right. So building off what you both just said, I think something is apparent to me. How many movies did they announce and never made before they decided that they were going to release The Mandalorian and Grogu? what are we like 7, 8 different movies? What I mean, there's been a lot of them. I don't want to go back and count them all up because we could spend 15, 20 minutes doing that. And I wanted to actually talk about this movie some more.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder, as maybe you were hinting at, Alan, if that they got to the point where they had to get a movie in theaters. And so they were finding that they couldn't get scripts from people that they wanted to work with that worked with the Lucasfilm vision of what a Star Wars is supposed to be. I can't help but wonder if that's changed given what they did at the season 2 of Andor and the like. If maybe they'll now be willing to take chances off that. But they had John Favreau, they have Dave Filoni. Those guys are contracted with Lucasfilm. They could get and they wanted to make a movie with those characters. And it's something that had been well received for the most part. Season 3 was a little bit divided on reception, but I don't want to get into that discussion right now.
Yeah.
So they put that out there because they had to get something in theaters. Just a thought. I don't know what the truth is to that, but there it is. Which leads me to this question. Actually, no. Before I ask that question, I don't want this whole episode to be us coming down on the movie because, like I said, I did enjoy it. I had a good time. I went and saw it 3 times, which I would have done for almost anybody if I wasn't enjoying it on some level.
Yeah.
So with that having been said, what were some things that you enjoyed from the movie?
I actually liked some of the winks at Star Wars history, like when one of the Imperial walkers gets blown up. It's almost a picture perfect recreation of one of Ralph McQuarrie's concept art things from The Empire Strikes Back, with a walker exploding and a snow speeder flying in the background. Like, I recognized it immediately as like one of those iconic sort of concept art pieces. And I was like, oh my gosh, they actually just decided visually to represent that on live screen. And that, for me, like, I liked it because it seemed to acknowledge the history, but also do it in a way that was, contemporary, as it were. Like, it made sense in the story. It didn't seem like they were, forcing something in some sort of awkward way. And I love Imperial walkers, and I love anything in the snow, as you've heard me on this very podcast, talking about The Empire Strikes Back. Everything about Hoth I love. And so getting back to walkers in the snow and snowtroopers running around and seeing like a different snowtrooper mask, like, I did love that stuff. I loved, and this is sort of, I think, possibly a little contrary to a lot of opinions, I liked the largely silent section of the movie with Grogu taking care of Mando. It actually made me think fondly, and yes, I'm actually going to say that, it made me think fondly of the Star Wars holiday special, and of all the time in there where it's just Wookiees going and without captions and without, without any subtitles or anything, like, and you're just living fully immersed in the environment and not questioning what's happening. You're just there in it. And that felt very much like what I experienced in, watching the Grogu scenes. And so that was fun. The Anzellans, I think, are hysterical. They made me laugh every time they're on screen. Them arriving back at Adelphi, and when one of them going, "First round's on me," and I'm like, this guy really. I love that they named one of them Minch, which was, like, for like deep cut stuff, that was what Yoda's name was, like, in early drafts of The Empire Strikes Back, like stuff like that. But you wouldn't necessarily, that's, and that's even deeper because you don't even find out their names in the movie. Like, you only hear about it, after the fact. So, little things like that were things I enjoyed, for example.
Jay, have you discovered anything else about the movie that you enjoyed that you didn't maybe pick up on your first viewing?
You mean except for Rada? So no. Well, I mean, both viewings, one thing I really appreciated was just the cinematic scale of everything was beautiful, and down to, the world building, and just getting to see Adelphi base and the Razor Crest, this new Razor Crest in all its glory, and getting to see kind of the real world aspect of those that were serving on the base, just kind of getting that almost behind the scenes kind of everyday life sort of thing. And I loved the music too, which I know is not
Yes.
technically part of the movie, but I just think that Ludwig Göransson just did a phenomenal job with everything. And, and I've loved the music from the series as well. And so he took this and notched it up, I just think quite a bit. And, and again, I just think that it's something that I guess I'm trying not to overthink it too much because it was a lot of fun. It was something that I enjoyed going into and watching for a couple of hours. There was definitely some instances where, especially in the arena, when the field goes out and then you just know that those aliens are going to wreak havoc, and my hands went up to my mouth and I said an explicative, kind of thing into my hands. And so it still had those little surprises and those kinds of things that we love about Star Wars. And so so those were the kinds of, and I like the Easter eggs that you talked about too, Alan, the little things, and getting to live that, and the creature treatments and the alien treatments I thought were phenomenal. And that's truly Star Wars as well. So yeah, so for me, that's where it really shined. But what about you, Dennis?
Well, and it's through this conversation with Alan that I'm really starting to discover that I like this movie. Again, it's not my top 5. I don't know where it ranks in the bottom half, but I pretty much like all the Star Wars movies, but just different degrees. And there's some that are my go-tos, and there's some that if I'm just doing a marathon, I'll put on the background, whatever. I mean, I do something Star Wars related every single day. But this is a movie where the sum is not greater than the parts. When it comes down to it, that opening sequence where the Mandalorian, as talk about the AT-ATs and things like that, love that. That is a great 14-15 minutes of Star Wars. I love the introduction when they get to El Delphi base and they're doing the Top Gun style credit sequence and things like that. I loved when the Adelphi squadron shows up at the end and their attack on the huts and things like that. There's a lot of great action scenes. What the movie ultimately lacks, I think, is a great thing that pulls things together, and then there's the character development. There's not a whole lot of character change over the course of this movie, which was what I think would have really helped drive things forward. It's funny, Jay, when we first reviewed this movie, I said that when I came in our first showing, I was not impressed with Ludwig Göransson's score, but I went and listened to it on Spotify, and I was very surprised today when I turned on the Spotify DJ and it played the opening song for The Mandalorian and Grogu, and it told me I listened to Ludwig Göransson in that a Mandalorian and Grogu track for something like 600 minutes in May.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, I didn't realize I had it on that much repeat because it came out at the end of the month, and I apparently was just playing it over and over and over again. I didn't realize that. It was good music I could listen to while I was working. Anything doesn't have lyrics is the way I go. But
yes.
But at any rate, and as you pointed out, Alan, I loved all the callbacks to everything that we know about, Star Wars, having Hugo Durant after we got Rio Durant and Solo, getting a lot of our classic aliens. One of the things, and I'm not adverse to getting new aliens introduced as we did through so much of the Disney era of Star Wars, but it was at the expense of our classic aliens. We get less Twi'leks, we get less Rhodians, we get less, Gamorreans, all of those things. But when Dave and John are doing a Star Wars movie, they rely on what's familiar with us to us. And that's great because that's the galaxy we want to be in. And so, yeah, sure, introduce a new one. I'm all for that. Gattori was cool, but give me the things that I go to Star Wars to see that gives me that comfort. So anyways, that's some of the stuff that I loved about the movie. And I am looking forward to this coming out on Disney Plus, and I can watch in chunks so that I can spend more time looking around in the background in 10, 15, 20 minutes a time, or just, putting it on while I'm doing something else and coming out and sitting down for my favorite scenes and digesting it that way. The way I do Star Wars most of the time now anyway, but I'm looking forward to that. Okay. One of the questions I had written before this and that I want to ask you now, Alan, What are your feelings about Starfighter right now?
I am looking toward that with greater anticipation now. I'll say feel like this was a nice warm up to things in a way, and so now I'm looking forward to a movie that I know very little about, and I have not been diving into the rumors and leaks too hard on this, but from what I'm gathering about it, or the impression they seem to have, I feel like this could be, a good big thing. And I don't get the idea that it was created as an ongoing thing. I mean, I understand that it's a continuation. It takes place after the Rise of Skywalker, and I don't know whether we're going to have any sequel trilogy characters show up in it, although I've heard, that there are rumors about that possibility happening. But I feel like it has the potential to lay the groundwork for something very interesting. This is just the kind of the impression I'm walking around with. And so I'm more hopeful about this one than I was about the Mandalorian and Grogu. Even leading into the Mandalorian and Grogu, I was like, I was excited for the movie. I was thrilled that we were going to have a Star Wars movie in theaters. But yeah, I did not walk in with hopes that it was going to, live up to something like even Rogue One or Solo, basically thinking, because I wasn't expecting it to be a Skywalker saga level of movie. I was thinking of it more like, like Mandalorian and Grogu, a Star Wars story, but even then my expectations were a little tempered. And so, yeah, I think this has kind of notched my expectations and, and hopes for Starfighter to, be something more than what we got out of this.
Yeah, you and I are of like minds on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been looking forward to Mandalorian and Grogu, but I've always been looking forward to Starfighter more. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. One, Mandalorian and Grogu have not been gone long enough for us to miss them.
Mm-hmm.
Two, we have so much content with them that we could just keep going back to it. I mean, I've rewatched the Mandalorian, the whole series, 2.5 times since the start of this series. Largely because, well, I watched it all on my own because I wanted to do it before the movie came out. And then with all the family that was in town for my son's graduations, the commercial for The Mandalorian Grogu came on, and my parents said, "Oh, we'd be interested in seeing that," but they'd never seen The Mandalorian. So I started watching it with them, and then we got through like the entire first season, and then I had to clear it off my Disney Plus queue, and then they came back and they wanted to watch where we picked up, and so I had to.
Right.
So I've seen a lot of it lately. Okay, so there's that. But as I've said a lot on this show, one of my favorite eras ever when it comes to being a Star Wars fan was those 2 years before The Force Awakens came out, when we were going to get back. And I love the way you put it earlier, that when we had those characters and legends, that was great, but we reset everything. And now we're picking up with, we're going to revisit old friends after all these years. We've not seen them forever. We could read about them, but we've not seen them on screen forever. We're getting new characters. We had all kinds of things that we could wonder about. And even if you weren't getting under the rumors, and I tried to avoid a lot of them, you saw images of them and you were wondering, who's that? What are they doing? It reminded me of being 8 years old and waiting for the Return of the Jedi coming out and going to the toy aisle at my local Target and seeing all the action figures and going, what is an Imperial Guard? What is a Scout Trooper? What's a Gamorrean Guard? What are all those things? And that is what I'm excited about with Star Wars, is that we're going to get a whole bunch of new stuff again. And we don't know anything about these characters. And so there's all this opportunity to wonder. There's all this opportunity to anticipate a story. And that's what I'm excited for again. And so anyway, that's my thought on it. But Jay, you and I have talked about this a lot. So, I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot to like have to regurgitate or come up with something new in the situation. But after having seen The Mandalorian and Grogu, what are you now thinking about Starfighter?
Oh, it's going to be a total gear shift. I mean, you're talking about a completely different tone, completely different type of storytelling. I feel like it's going to have a different theme. It's going to have, obviously it's in a different time era of Star Wars. So, as you were just saying, Alan, it's a Star Wars story, right? And so I think I'm excited just because of everything that you guys have said, as far as it's a totally new adventure. We don't know anything really about it. I mean, we do, but we don't. We can't really speculate a whole lot as far as what the story is going to truly be about or what direction it's going to take. Ryan Gosling, I mean, everything the guy touches turns to gold. So, I'm hoping that his track record kind of, obviously continues to stay true on that type of track. And so I think in that regard, it's going to be something that we can embrace as, this is something new and different, and it's going to add to what we already have and what we already know, and it's just going to be another toy in our Star Wars toy box kind of thing. And so I'm excited, and I'm really hyped for, as you guys were saying, just looking forward to that anticipation beforehand. And so that's one thing about Mando and Grogu, I think, that maybe did it a little bit of a disservice going into the theater, and kind of getting back to what you said, Alan, as well, about, if we would have had the first 4 episodes of season 1 of The Mandalorian come out as a movie, maybe it would have hit so much differently. And it would have been something that we would have been talking about forever and ever, as opposed to the way that we got it, which again, comes back to that whole idea of how we consume our Star Wars too, which is, kind of bittersweet to think about, that we have to even have that type of conversation. But bottom line, at the end of the day, I'm super excited about it. And I just think it's going to be a heck of a ride.
Well, in relation to that too, let me ask the both of you, if I may, because this is something I've been thinking as well, in terms of, and since we brought up Andor and we're talking about John and Dave, there's that famous thing about John and Dave getting to play with all the Star Wars toys, right? And there was a comment from Tony Gilroy that sounded like, if you wanted to make something out of it, that it was like a shot across that bow of the idea that some people approach this IP and say, what toys can we play with in the toy box? And other people say, well, what stories can we tell? And we're going to add toys to the toy box in the process of telling those stories, instead of just looking at the IP as a box full of toys that they can take out. And I'm saying that knowing that also another thing I loved about The Mandalorian and Grogu was the Amani, those the creatures that they were using in the water and whatnot, and made me think of that Amon action figure that was in the character from Jabba's palace, and like, wow, they invented something really cool and made that a really intimidating creature. But what do you think about that? Like, it feels like a kind of a divide, right? There's the use the toys or tell stories that add toys to the toy box, and I feel like Mando use the toys in the toy box. They didn't necessarily like add to the toy box. And I feel like Starfighter, part of my anticipation is that they're going to add to the toy box. I don't know. What do you guys think about that whole conversation?
Yeah. I mean, it's a double-bladed darksaber, right? Because I mean,
yeah.
At one point, Grogu was a new toy in the toy box, and we were all so excited about having this baby Yoda, and having this Mandalorian that was completely kind of off the whole beaten path from what we'd seen in the past. And so I think, again, it's kind of like, well, what's our definition of a new toy? Somewhere along the lines, it had to be introduced at some point. So I think that it comes down to comfort factor, versus a little bit more of adventure. And I guess, if you want to look at Starfighter in the way that I'm sure that there will be some familiar toys, there's at least going to be the feel of some familiar toys, but it also might be where, you take your Lego set and you pull it apart and you put it back together in something different. And it's still a great, like, Lego set. You use the same pieces, but you just created something new. So I don't know if that's where this is going to go, but I'm just trying to keep a really open mind to that in terms of how it's going to fit into our toy box in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that answer.
yeah. Dennis, what about you?
My thoughts are really scattered on this, but the quote that comes to mind, and I don't know that I've actually heard George Lucas say this, but it's been attributed to him, which is continuity is for wimps. And I
Yeah.
think
Yes.
sometimes that as much as we want everything that's going on in Star Wars now to make sure that it fits in perfectly with everything that came before it, it holds back a certain amount of storytelling. And I know, and I'm paraphrasing this, Tony Gilroy wasn't so concerned with all of that. There's a story he wanted to tell, and he told it, and he let other people kind of mold it into the timeline that we've got now for Star Wars.
Right.
And he still used a lot of our favorite toys. He used TIE Fighters. He used K2SO again. He brought back the characters that he had when he finished up Rogue One. And so that's all fantastic. And I love that. I mean, just thinking back to, he also worked on Rogue One. We had the Ghost. We had Chopper show up in the background. And so they still used some of our favorite toys. But I think what set Andor apart, it was not afraid to tell a Star Wars story in a way that we traditionally do not get Star Wars stories. And, we did an episode, I don't know, a couple months ago after I saw Project Hail Mary, still my favorite movie of this year. And it was directed by Lord and Miller. And the question I asked, should we give Lord and Miller a second chance at doing Star Wars? And
Alan's like, yes.
Yeah, and the reason being is because that movie was simply fantastic. And we know that Kathleen Kennedy did not like the way they were making a movie. And that's what ultimately led to their dismissal. And it sounds like things maybe got off the rails. I don't want to go into that's a whole nother episode in itself, and we already did it. But the point being is that, as you were suggesting, Jay, Sean Levy is coming in to do a Star Wars movie. He has a way of making movies. It does not have to be the Lucasfilm way. And so I like this idea that we can get creators that will take our Star Wars toys and give us a new story with them. So, Alan, I don't know that I actually answered your question. I don't know that I took a side. I think I found more of a middle ground on that one. But
no, I like that. I like that there's, because it definitely gets pitched. And I think this is just part of our modern social media discourse where everything has to be, either black or white, or everything has to, say, no, it's either, you're in one camp or you're in the other camp, and everything is sort of meant to divide us in some fashion. And I like the fact that there's got to be some sort of middle ground in the situation. I think you both have it, very astutely, noted that it is taking some of the toys and some of the inspiration from what's come before, but finding new stories to tell, basically, and new ways to tell those stories. And if they keep doing that and keep pushing the boundaries of what is possible for Star Wars, especially considering that, like, the whole thing, is the word pastiche, is that what the actual word is for it? Like, that it just mixes up sci-fi and Westerns and samurai movies and all this into one big melange. And, like, if it keeps pushing that, then it's doing what Star Wars is supposed to do. And it's, and if it's playing it safe, as you put it, Dennis, like, then, that's fine. And, but it's not going to set box office records. That's for sure.
Well said. And, I just have to say, like, how great is it, though, that here we are going on almost 50 years later, and we're still able to say that Star Wars is forever. We can sit here and say the future of Star Wars could be this or it could be that, but we know that there will be a future. So that's the one thing that I constantly go back to, and just I'm so grateful for that we still continue to have things to talk about, and we still continue to have things to look forward to, because not every franchise can say that, and not every fandom is able to, relish in the idea of, ooh, there's something on the horizon kind of thing. So I'm so grateful for that. And I know you guys are too.
Yeah. I mean, when's the last time we had a Star Trek movie?
That was actually something I was about to bring up, but we could go 15, 20 minutes on that. And we're already at an hour. And
I keep opening doors that you're like, I'm not going to walk through that one.
It's with 2 more episodes to record here. There's just so much I can talk about, and we're going to have to get back in another month to discuss some of these ideas. I'll just simply say this. What I find ironic right now is that we're criticizing well, it's not ironic, but it's coincidental. We're criticizing Star Wars because it's not taking new chances and trying new things. Meanwhile, Star Trek just took a chance and tried a new thing with Starfleet Academy. The fans revolted, and now it's being canceled after a second season. So I don't know if anyone else has watched that, but anyway, just an observation.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to end with 2 questions for Alan here. First off, I asked Jay this after we first started talking about the Mandalorian Grogu, but Mandalorian Grogu or Maul Shadow Lord? Which did you enjoy more?
I'm still not all the way through Maul Shadow Lord.
Really? Wow.
What?
Okay.
Because I'm trying to watch it with my son, and he and I have not been
Okay.
able to line up a lot of time. But I moved on and watched all of Andor season 2 without him, and I felt badly about that. So I was like, no, I'm gonna commit to like watching this with him. We just haven't been able to line up, so I'm only halfway through it. But so far,
Wow.
Maul Shadow Lord. Like without, I mean, yeah, and assuming it sticks the landing for season 1, which at this point I have every reason to believe that it will, then yeah, Maul Shadow Lord is my answer.
When you're done, you let me know, and we're having you back to talk about that.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Second, and I'm putting you on the spot now, and I acknowledge that up front. As our Hope expert, what does this movie say about Hope?
Well, I think probably, yeah, it isn't a lot. And we kind of already, hinted at this earlier in the episode. Like, it doesn't have a lot to say about it. I will say that if there's anyone who's particularly hopeful in the movie, it's Grogu. And the fact that he makes the choice to leave the Anzellans and stay on that planet, to knowing that there are all manner of terrors in that planet, and he's already seen a bunch of really horrific creatures, knowing that that's the case, knowing that he is just going to be a snack for anything. I mean, he got swallowed by one of those bullfrogs that we saw from Jabba's palace, right? Like, he's as much as he does have some force capacity, like, he is a really vulnerable character, and yet he takes the most hopeful route in that time. Like, Mando says, get out of here, like, get to safety, and he won't leave him behind. Like, he actually has hope that he can do something about it. He has the idea of what the better state is. He has the firm belief that he can do something about it, even if he's not necessarily sure what it's going to be. And he has the agency to be able to take action around it. Like, he's able to, hide him from enemies. He's able to, meditate on, what might be a possibility for him to find a solution. Like, he ends up finding that character in the middle of the swamp. Like, everything about his actions are hopeful. Like, he feels like he can actually do something. You could make the same case for the Mandalorian, that he's hopeful that he can capture this otherwise mysterious and undocumented Imperial warlord. That, certainly a possibility, but that feels more like confidence in abilities than necessarily hope per se. I mean, it is, there is a hopeful element to it, but it definitely feels more like assuredness in one's ability. Like, oh yeah, this is, this will be easy. Like, yeah, you think he's impossible to find, you don't have a picture, all right, I'll be able to find him. Like, no problem. I don't want to talk to the Hutts, but if that's what I have to do. Like, hope doesn't even factor into the equation for him. Basically, it's just, this is a job to do, and he's going to do it. So yeah, I feel like Grogu is our hope center of the movie, basically. And I like what he does with it. I like that he follows through with it and that he's rewarded. So that's what I'll say about that.
You got a whole chapter you just wrote.
I was going to say, we just got a preview of chapter 1 of volume 2 of Hyperspacing Hope. I love this. Okay. This guy should have a podcast.
I shouldn't I?
We'll get to that in a second. All right. Well, yes. Alan, thank you. And I'm going to have you promote your stuff here in just a second. But I want to thank everyone for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and the discussion of Mandalorian and Grogu. I'm really glad we got to do this. I've been wanting to talk about it more since I've seen it the last couple times. We hope everyone has enjoyed the conversation. And if so, please subscribe to the podcast on your podcast of choice. We're pretty much available everywhere. We appreciate your ratings, reviews, comments, wherever you can leave those. And of course, you can find all episodes of the show over on retrozap.com. I want to give a special thanks to River Qui-Gon Jinn, who's been commenting on a lot of our shows on Spotify recently. And he mentioned that one of his favorite parts of The Mandalorian and Grogu was when the Zellans returned and blasted the swamp rat and the swamp there. So that was fun for him. And he also was very fond of our conversation with you, Alan. We were discussing Hyperspace Hope, and he commented that he was looking forward to reading that book. So again, special thanks to River Qui-Gon Jinn on that.
Thank you, River Qui-Gon Jinn, too.
Yeah, and with that, Alan, let everyone know about the book and where else they can find you.
So Hyperspacing Hope is available on Amazon, and it came out just at the very end of 2025, beginning of 2026, depending on what time zone you were in when it came out. And there's definitely more to explore in the realm of Hope and Star Wars. And I'm considering how, now that the Mandalorian movie is out, do I go back for the series and stuff? So, but yes, I think a volume 2 is probably in the offing with more movies coming out. And I'll try not to start listing all the ones that I have in my head that never made it. White knuckling through that. I still have all the episodes of Star Wars 7x7 available on your favorite podcasting apps and also on YouTube that are available for you to check out. And the hub for everything is still sw7x7.com.
All right. Fantastic.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for coming back. And like I said, I want you to finish Maul Shadowlord. And when you do, let us know, because I'd love to talk about that more again with you.
Too.
I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yes.
All right.
And Maul's hopeful also, I think, based on first few episodes.
I can't wait to ask you that question. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Big Hope character there, I think, actually. Yeah.
Another chapter waiting to be written right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody where we can be found?
Absolutely. So you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust if you want to hit us up on those socials. And then we also have some Pinterest boards with lots of fun ideas for everything Star Wars. So check that out. And if you need yet another outlet to listen to us, we are on 2 different types of YouTube outlets. So we are on the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So no video, just audio, but you can definitely subscribe, share those out, leave us comments. Just like River Qui-Gon Jinn did over on Spotify, you can do that as well. And we're also on Audible and all the places. So if you'd like to drop us a line that's not super conducive to social media, you can do so at our Gmail address, which is podcastartist@gmail.com. And if you'd like to pick up some Podcast Artist swag, you can head over to the link in our show notes, which is our TeePublic store. And we have tons of different products over there that you can choose from. And you can have a nice summer refresh for your wardrobe. So once again, head over to that link in our show notes.
All right. What's going on in cosplay?
Right now, a little quiet on the old cosplay front. I had a huge May, so I'm kind of laying low for a little bit now. But you can always find me over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And over there as Ahsoka and Hera, the fourth sister, just having all kinds of fun. So once again, that's at j.snipscosplay.
Okay. Coming on the show on Friday will be the end of the week with a look at some recent Star Wars news. And then on Monday, we are continuing our Clone Wars rewatch with a look at the first episode of season 4. So thanks for listening to episode 1049 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be